All right, so today we're going to do the rear brakes on a Kia Sorento with all of the caveats of, oh, sorry, it's an Optima, sorry about that. So the rears are a little more interesting than the fronts, but we'll get rolling here in just a second. First thing is going to be tire removal.
What, you don't have a pause button?
There's a pause. All right, so now that the wheel is off, a couple of steps before you pull off the caliper. This torsion bar, you have to pull this one off. This is a 3/4 inch bolt here. And then you have to also pull the shock absorber because this bolt is so long that when you push it out, it's going to hit the shock. So both of these are 3/4 inch bolts. Sorry for the difficult visual here, but you need to pull this guy and this guy for this arm, and then you'll also need to pull the shock absorber. I found that taking the shock absorber after you pull the bolt out and then zip tying it up here to the coil spring will keep it out of the way. Realigning them on the reassembly portion is difficult. And they must go in, it has to go back in with the nut on the outside, or else the next time you will not be able to get this out. So it's a little bit of a hassle. Let me just make a little video here. It's a little bit of a hassle to get it back aligned and through again, as we found from doing the other sides. This is the second side of the car that we're doing. But we'll remove these two bolts, get the shock out of the way, get this bolt out, and then we can work on the caliper. All right. So we're getting the bolt off. We've got a open end wrench on the other end, 3/4, both are 3/4, and we'll get that sway arm off of there.
Like tap on there.
So at this point, we use the bolt from the shock absorber bottom to drive the bolt for the suspension arm backwards out. But you got to move the shock out of the way or it's going to hit. So use one bolt to just drive the other one out with a soft rubber mallet so that you don't wreck any of the threads.
Yeah, there you go.
So we use the bolt from the shock absorber to drive the suspension arm bolt out. There it goes. Now you got to drop that suspension arm out of the way so that you can get doesn't take any pressure, so it's no big deal. It'll just hang there. It's got a rubber mount on the other side. So on the caliper, you have the caliper right here. You need to remove two bolts. One is right here. Oops, sorry about that. And the other one is blocked by the suspension arm, which we just pulled down out of the way and zip tied. I'm going to hand it down to get a better view, because it's inside here. And you have to move the suspension arm to get at this bolt. After you remove the caliper, then you need to first of all, make sure that everything moves properly and it moves in and out. If these are seized up or full of goop, you want to clean them. But I take off these two bolts right here. That will take off the non-piston side of the caliper, and we can easily put the new pads in and then put this back on again. This will not let any fluid out of the caliper. So we're going to take these off, and then we're going to retract the caliper component. Oops, I can't see the lights upside down. So we have to retract the piston back in so that we can get the pads in properly. So we need to retract that piston. So these two bolts, and then push the piston back in. So the next section, we have to take off the caliper. We can do this before or after. Some people will use a little C-clamp to push back the piston and then drive the hydraulic fluid back up into the reservoir. You can also, I mean, I'll get flamed for this, but I usually take a screwdriver. I don't put it up against the rotor. I stick it in between the brake and the caliper, and I gently apply a little bit of pressure so that it pushes that piston back. People will say, oh, but you could break this. I understand. But I just put a little bit of pressure. If it doesn't move easily, then I move to the C-clamp. But if it moves easily, this is a great time just to do it. That way, then you don't have to push the piston back in later on. So now the caliper will come off easily because you push the piston back. Now we're going to take these two bolts here and here off because it makes it substantially easier to get the brake pads in. We'll flip this over. Of course, make careful of your brake lines. You don't want to flex your hydraulic lines. But we'll take this off. This will not let any of the fluid out of the piston chamber. So we'll take this off. It makes it substantially easier. We found out the hard way to get the brake pad back in, and then we just pop these back in after we're done, and then we'll lubricate these to make sure that these slide and move easily inside of the little rubber grommets. Of course, inspecting them for any type of wear or cracks. Now we'll pull the brake pads out and note the orientation of the brake pads, because when you, sorry about my light, God, this is terrible. When you pull these out, one side will have where you can see where the piston is, where the piston hit it. The other side will have two little nibs on it. So make sure that you put them correctly back in. The nib side, the two little nibbles are away from the piston. Piston side goes like this. And then we'll change the chatter springs, which are right inside of here, at the same time with the new ones that come with the kit. So here's the old pads right here. Here's the caliper front brace. And then these are the anti-chatters right here that we will put in. When we put them in, notice the orientation when you take them out, but if you didn't notice it, they will go in. There's a little tiny, let me hold this for a second. Yes, right here. These will grab on to the inside. I'll show you when we put them back in. This will point towards the inside of the caliper. The brake pad will reside underneath here to keep it from vibrating. This will be on the outside of the caliper. So as we put in the anti-chatters back in, you'll notice that there's indentations right here, and they fit. You can't put it backwards. Do that on both sides. Yep, they should just kind of hold themselves in. Perfect. There's one. We'll do this second one. Next comes the pads. Remember, the one that goes against the piston goes on the inside. The one with the two nibs goes on the outside.
So the one on the piston goes right here, right?
Yeah. You'll have to fiddle around with it a little bit, get it in the groove, and then you'll have to fiddle around with the anti-chatter, and then you'll get these kind of in place. It can take a little bit of fiddling with the anti-chatter piece. It'll pop out on you a couple of times. Like that. So you just put it back in again. Yeah, this just takes a little bit of time. Once you get it positioned in there, then they'll sit, and then we'll reassemble it. We'll put it back onto the other portion. So when you're complete, they should be sitting in here like this. These will be in, the anti-chatters will be sitting on top of them, nice and flush. Don't push them in too far. And then now we'll put this back on to the rest of the caliper and reassemble. So we found that putting it back onto the rotor first, because the brake pads kept popping out. So putting it onto the rotor, and then we squish them together just a little bit, and then putting the other portion of the rotor on was better, because every time it would pop off if we didn't do it this way. So this made it much easier to do it just like this. Yeah, so here we go. So pop these back on. Now the caliper bolts will go in. I would do the top one first. Don't tighten it up so that you can get that lower one where the suspension comes in on second. This will require some wiggling in and out because the caliper can't touch the rotor, so you need to find the hole of it by moving the caliper in and out. So once your caliper is done, brakes look good, double check everything. Make sure that these two right here for the where it compresses are on, and then of course this guy right here. And then where the suspension comes in down here, the other screw is right inside of here. Now we're going to cut this zip tie, and we're going to pull the suspension arm back into place and put the bolt back in. The bolt will go with the nut facing out, which is a kind of a pain to reassemble. But if you put it with the nut on the inside, you will not be able to extract the bolt again in the future. So it is a pain to get it from this way into this way. Oops, sorry, from the back forward, going this direction. But it will make any future, unless you want to sell the car, it'll make any future repairs easy because you can drive the bolt out, but there's no way to get behind here. So this is a bit of a pain. We're gonna line it up. We're gonna use a screwdriver, and then we're gonna use the bolt from the shock absorber to help us align it, pull it out, and then come through with the actual bolt that's supposed to be in there. All right, after several hours of dinging around, just gonna get the camera here, trying to get this bolt through this support arm up here, was very difficult, as everybody will say the same thing. You'd be tempted to put the nut facing the front of the car and drive the bolt through from the other direction, which would be very easy, but then you'd never be able to get this bolt out again because you could take the nut off, but then there's no way to drive it out because there's not enough room. So through sheer tenacity, we're able to finally get the bolt in the correct direction with the nut on it. Tried several things. We had a jack stand underneath the support arm right here. Oops, sorry about that. Underneath the support arm right here, trying to, lower the car a little bit with the lift so that it would put a little bit of pressure on right here, and we were able to kind of adjust this, opening. We tried a center punch just to straighten it up. Nothing we could do would get it lined up, and we couldn't get it through. What I eventually did was I loosened up this, where it bolts into the frame, this end of this support A-arm, and then I was able just to tap it gently with a rubber mallet going out on it a little bit, which slid it, out on this bolt shaft just a little bit, and that lined up this guy, and I was finally able to pop it through, put the nut on, and then just retighten this. I didn't have to take it off, I just loosened it and then tapped gently with a rubber mallet here to move this out, onto this bolt shaft a little bit, and all it needed was to move away from the frame just enough to get this through. So now we've got this back in. All we have to do at this point is throw the shock absorber back in, throw the bolt on that, and then pop the tire back on. So this will go through the shock absorber. At this point, I'll probably just stop because it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. Put the bolt through the bottom of the shock absorber and throw the tire on. But all in all, an interesting design that is extremely problematic. Took several hours, a lot of wiggling, and a tremendous amount of swear words, but we're finally able to get this rear brake job done. We'll double check all tightness, torque everything appropriately, and then we should be good to go. Of course, remember to pump the brakes a couple of times to get the piston back again, because the first time you start your car up, the piston will be fully retracted and your car won't want to stop for the first couple of pumps of the brakes. So always start your car up, pump the brakes until the piston engages and your brake pedal feels good, then proceed to move the car. Don't just pop it into reverse or drive, and then, because the first time you hit your brakes, the car is not going to stop. With that, we'll end the video. I hope this was helpful to somebody. Have a great day.